This episode of Sovryn Tech is brought to you by Free Talk Live. If you want to listen to the number 26 talk show in the United States, oh baby, you know where you got to go. You go to freetalklive.com. It's an open phones call-in show. You can call in, talk about whatever you want to talk about. And you can go to their website, freetalklive.com, and listen to episodes. I mean, they've been going for over a decade. You have so much to listen to there. They go 7 nights a week, 3 hours a night. You don't want to miss it. Check it out. I don't know if you're going to be able to listen to every episode, but boy, they become like family. Not before long, you end up listening to them so much. I love it. I was a host at one point on Free Talk Live for a good couple of years. Such a great time. I'm honored that they sponsor Sovryn Tech. Go check them out, freetalklive.com. Now, let's get to the show.
Accessing historical database. Year 2020. The tech giants become aware of the greatest threat to their corporatist domination. An obscure science and tech podcast becomes a major factor in a peaceful open source revolt against the military Silicon Valley industrial complex. The podcast, Sovryn Tech. Its host, Dr. Brian Sovryn. The tech giants tried to stop Sovryn Tech. They can't.
Woo! The man of tomorrow is here, the Golden Stallion, Savzu, the rated R radio star, baby, ready to get into all the science and tech news that's worth talking about this week. Okay, now maybe we don't talk about everything that's worth talking about, but we get in as much as we can inside of this wild ride of a couple hours. And of course, we keep it as varied as we can as well. And wow, do we have some things to talk about this week? Because I saw things in the past week that just blow my mind, but I actually play off of what appears to be, based on the emails I've gotten, of course, questions at sovryntech.com if you want to email the show, even if you don't have a question and you just want to, yell at me or try to. Good luck. But a controversial conversation that we had around Twitter last week, as well as 5G, which I'm going to save it for when we get to story of the week. But somehow people thought I went off on a deep end with 5G last week when I didn't even talk about the health concerns, which is what most people bring up. But to show, well, maybe to even follow up on that, we'll wait till we get to the main story this week, and then, we'll get into that. But we're going to talk about Twitter, some more Twitter nonsense, and more of, let's say hypocritical attitudes and platitudes on Twitter's part. But right now, I hold in my hand the Gom Jabbar. No, that's I hold at your neck. Sorry. Though you could wear this around your neck. In fact, I used to do that that's kind of ironic too, because I did wear something relative to this around my neck for many, many years. Now I just keep it on my keychain, but this is also something you could keep on your keychain. I know the mystery is killing you. What is the man of tomorrow talking about? Well, what I am talking about is a new version of Tails came out, which I think is important to bring up because, and I mean, I usually let you know when a new version of Tails comes out, which is, of course, the amnesic, right? The Tor operating system, basically. We cover it often on the show. I try to use it as my daily driver as much as possible. Of course, how to do that we've covered in past episodes. But anyway, version 4.6 came out. Now, version 4.5, we spent a little time talking about, which came out recently, because it allows Tails to boot up even with secure boot still on in the UEFI on your computer, on most computers. And I mean, of course, the ramifications of that, frankly, are huge. I think the ramifications of what's in version 4.6, one particular feature I think is just as key, pun intended. And that is now version 4.6 of Tails can accept YubiKeys, or anything that works as a hardware second factor authentication. Now, it doesn't just have to be YubiKeys. There's other companies out there, but anybody that's basically FIDO2 or part of the FIDO Alliance, or that operates under that, will now work with Tails. And this was something. I can't even remember what version of Tails we were talking about that I said, boy, I hope this comes in soon. This is one of the features that I really want able to work, okay, in Tails, is give us that hardware 2FA. Let my YubiKey, which the thing that, what I was referencing earlier, that I used to wear around my neck all the time. I used to wear a YubiKey around my neck. Just all the time. Like I said, now I basically keep it on my keychain, but since they're, fairly indestructible, my YubiKey 5, I keep that, on my keychain at any given moment. And I also actually keep on my keychain, I do keep a separate flash drive that runs, that has Tails installed on it, because you have to run Tails off of a flash drive. Now, I have a flash drive that I don't keep on my keychain, and that has persistent storage turned on to where I can put in custom apps and use email, PGP and everything. And I will have that into my own little laptop, and it is a very little laptop that only runs Tails. Okay, it does have Ubuntu 20.04 on it now as well, but anyway, it was a Windows machine. Haha, no longer. But these are great things to always keep on hand, and for them to work in conjunction, to have both my, I basically on my keys, I have three things. You'll see three what look like flash drives. Of course, a YubiKey isn't exactly a flash drive, looks like one though. But I'll have my YubiKey on there. I'll have another flash drive, and of course, I get flash drives that are basically indestructible, very waterproof, weatherproof, all that. I'll have the YubiKey on there. I'll have another flash drive that's running Steve Gibson's, of course, his hardware utility, or should I say his hard drive utility, that being SpinRite. I'll have that on there. And then I will have another flash drive, which will have a copy of Tails on it in any given moment. And I got used to doing that because it used to be, this hasn't been true since version 4 of Tails came out, but it used to be that to make a copy of Tails onto another flash drive, the easiest thing to do was to make it within Tails itself. So, and I've had this happen at conferences where, literally somebody will just come up to me. In fact, a Sovereign Tech listener, I can remember even recently, would come up to me and say, "Hey, you got a copy of Tails with you? Because I need to make a, I need to make a flash drive of Tails on it for whatever, beautiful activism was going on at the time." And of course, I was happy to oblige. And so, I've learned to do that over the years. You don't need to do that anymore. Now you can because it used to be in Windows, you'd have to have two flash drives to be able to pull it off to install it. That's not true anymore. You can do it with one flash drive and install it, kind of like you do almost any other, more or less like you do any other operating system. You have to use Etcher and whatever. But anyway, that's not so necessary anymore, but it's just a habit I got into, and I still think it's a great habit to have. And, speaking of great habits, actually, speaking of live, okay. Because again, version 4.6 is live. If you're already running version 4.5 or whatever, you can just, you boot into it and it automatically upgrades. It's really slick. But speaking of live, I was just thinking about this the other day. This isn't a story at all. We're going to get into a story that has to do with operating systems here during the Foreplay, where we talk about all the little things going on. But I was just thinking about this. And now I wrote it down in my show notes, and now I don't even remember what really brought it up. I can only remember the feeling I had after whatever the impetus was. I know what it was. There was some legal, there's some legal bullshit that I was handling, and I had to basically I had to use OneDrive for part of this. And it's funny because the URL for OneDrive, right, for Microsoft's OneDrive, is still onedrive.live.com. And of course, remember, OneDrive used to be, wasn't it SkyDrive originally? And then whatever Microsoft got sued for that or something, some bullshit copyright nonsense. But live.com, and I was just thinking about it for a second, because live.com and all of the live, what did they have? All the different things, Messenger Live, or Live Messenger. They had all these, Microsoft is really going all in the later aughts on this whole live.com thing and all the features that came along there too. In fact, you can get, the Windows Live Pack, which turned into, eventually they started calling it Windows Essentials. The last version came out in 2012. I still keep the offline exe for that around because it's the only way you can install Windows Movie Maker, which is a brilliant, if you use Windows, and of course you shouldn't, and a lot of people aren't. We're going to talk about that. But it's still just a brilliant, very simple, cut and dry way of making very basic videos. In fact, videos that I made for user podcasts, believe it or not, I used the age-old Windows Movie Maker to put those together, and I think they turned out fairly well. Anyway, you can see for yourself. Just go to my YouTube channel to check those out. But anyway, I was just thinking about the name live.com. Who the fuck thought that was a good idea? Like, it's no wonder they kind of branded away from that. I mean, they're still holding on to it. Was it actually supposed to be live.com? I don't think so, because I've never heard anybody say Live Messenger, and that sounds even worse. But who thought live.com was a good idea? I mean, does that name make any sense online? Yeah, you're going live. I mean, that's so Steve Ballmer, Microsoft stupidity, as far as branding goes. It really is. It doesn't make sense. And like, I get, we talked about this recently, and in fact, I just started getting the notifications on some of my devices where now it's basically official. Again, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago, that Office 365 is now morphed into Microsoft 365. And of course, we talked about what all of that most likely and really does mean, that it's, obviously about much more than Office. But anyway, you can go listen back to episodes about that to find that out. I think that the title Microsoft 365 is even there, or is the title of the episode. But anyway, they rebrand, and I understand that. And I get where going from calling it Office 365 to Microsoft 365 makes some sense, especially based on what we predict that's really about. But live.com. I was just thinking about it. I mean, it's a stupid thing, but that's just it. It's just a stupid thing. I was thinking, who thought that was a great idea? This is what happens when you have the tucked in shirts coming up with decisions, right? Anyway, crazy shit. But let's move on from that. Speaking of, maybe needing to rebrand or running into branding issues, Windows 10. In fact, this is a story got shared. This is from Frostbite's great website. This got shared actually by a Sovereign Tech listener in the Sovereign Tech Telegram group. If you want to join that, of course, link is in the show notes for every episode. You can't miss it. It's like plastered in 3 or 4 places of where to join that. All you have to do is have Telegram installed, click on the link, and boom, it just takes you right to it. And you just say join, and away you go. It's not something that's only for patrons, because guess what? There are no more. I mean, there are patrons. There are still people who support the show, and I'm honored by that. For your financial support means everything to me. I mean, it really does, and keeps the show going round and round. But there is no such thing as content behind a paywall anymore. In fact, I could get into a huge screed about that because I am amazed at how many people who are still financially supporting this show, who have just applauded the move and have basically written me saying, or even called me and said, every podcast should do this. And in fact, I don't even want to listen to podcasts anymore that are putting their stuff behind a paywall. And I had a couple people say, yeah, the only thing I listen to, what did they list off? They listed off like 3 podcasts. I think they said they listened to me, Steve Gibson, and Ben Greenfield. And they said, that's it. Anybody popping stuff behind a paywall, they're not even interested anymore. They thought their public work should stand for itself. And I appreciated what they said. I was really honored by their words. But anyway, we don't have to get down that sidetrack, at least not right now. Of course, if you ever want me to. Now, in the full 2-hour version, once again, of Sovryn Tech, we have the Q&A segment within Sovryn Tech, and you can ask me a question. And if you want to ask me about that, I can talk more about that. But moving on, here we go. From Frostbites, I'm actually going to read a little bit of it, even though in the Foreplay, we usually don't read the stories directly. But in this case, I'm going to, because it points at what we talked about a lot during 2019, and we've also talked quite a bit about during 2020, is that it is time. And I'm not the only podcast that has said this. In fact, when we just mentioned, Security Now has also gone, or parts of Security Now have gone on record basically saying that, yeah, Windows 10 doesn't belong in the home anymore. You know, like nobody should be using this. Everybody should be jumping over to Linux. Well, according to Frostbites, here we go. This is from May 4th. So very fresh. May 4th, actually just today, May 4th, 2020. Windows 10 users are switching to Mac OS and Linux. Woo. Now I have, real quick, I mean, the headline says it all, but we'll look at some of the stats here. I mean, I've even gone so far as to say, you know, go ahead and use Chromebooks. Like, just get away from Windows 10 because there's such a lack of security and there's so many problems, user-facing problems with Windows 10 right now that it's basically making the entire interconnected online infrastructure, you know, that being the internet and so on, it's making all of us less secure the more people using Windows 10. Like it's becoming that kind of problem. I mean, and again, what happens, you know, with your data getting deleted merely because of bugs within Windows and so on. I mean, those are bad enough. You don't have to think about other people as for a reason to stop using Windows 10. There are plenty of reasons for you and you alone to want to get off of it. Okay. But this is great news. Let's read a little bit here. As per the latest data released by Net Market Share, Windows 10 has lost some of its loyal users to macOS and Linux distros. Continuing the legacy, Microsoft Windows 10 OS monopolized the market since its launch back in 2015. Recently, it reached the 1 billion active devices milestone, a dream that got delayed by over 2 years. But it seems that the sweet success for Windows in the OS market now comes with a pinch of sourness. Speaking of the numbers, the desktop market share for Windows OS has dropped by 2% between March 2020 and April 2020. Now, when you consider the amount of installs that Windows has, and they're not just talking about Windows 10, they're talking about Windows OS in general, which probably points at part of what's going on here. When you consider the amount of installs, 2% is a number likely in the millions. That's nothing to sneeze at. Okay, that's a lot of people getting off of a platform, right? Getting off of an operating system here. Read on a little bit. That void has been filled by Apple's, and they have some numbers here. I'll put a link in the show notes so you can look at it yourself. That void has been filled by Apple's Mac OS, which saw a 0.8% boost in market share during the same period. However, what's surprising is that the desktop market share of Linux distros has increased by 1.5%, which is almost double than that of Mac OS. Furthermore, if we compare the data from April 2019 and April 2020, there is a decrease of 1.3% in the last 12 months. That means some Windows users want to look elsewhere. Still, Microsoft's beloved operating system finds a home in over 88% of all desktops and laptops. Meanwhile, speaking of Windows 10, its individual market share has dropped from 57.34% in March to 56.03% in April 2020. Now, I want to talk about that last paragraph, because in that last paragraph, I think it's pretty clear what's happening there. I mean, they have a little bit of a write-up of why Windows is losing popularity, and I'll read that. But I think what's pretty clear what's happening there is the amount of stories from the cumulative updates and where they are, I mean, to the point of almost bricking laptops and desktops. I mean, people are just tired of it. And certainly even my messaging, and I've heard it on other podcasts as well, of telling people, get Windows 10 off of your fucking machines at home. You know, I mean, it's a groundswell that's happening right now. And I've been in the tech space for, well, and I can say it, for decades. Okay. But again, it's a groundswell that I haven't seen. I don't think I've ever seen it this bad. You know, I mean, certainly Bill Gates is taking shit now for completely different reasons than Windows dominance, right? Or Microsoft's dominance or Internet Explorer's dominance at the time. Of course, we're talking in the 90s. But yeah, I've really, it's a fever pitch right now, and I couldn't be happier. And of course, the story from Frostbites is really just doubling down on the matter. Let me read their subheader of why is Windows losing its popularity. Here we go. When it comes to market share numbers, up and downs in graphs are a common thing. However, if you want to list down the reasons behind this considerable drop, then there could be a few. Firstly, the Windows 7 OS reached its end of life in January this year. That means the users who can't get security updates anymore might be looking for some good Windows 7 alternatives. Possibly they found Linux and Mac OS as better choices over Windows 10. Another reason could be buggy software updates, which of course we brought up. It has been long since Windows 10 users have installed an update without running into some nasty error or sacrificing their system to blue screens of death. While Microsoft is putting sincere efforts in testing Windows 10 2004, and that's, I guess the latest version that'll be coming out, it remains or the next big, what do they do biannually where they do the major revision? That's the next one. It remains to be seen whether it could prevent more people from abandoning the ship in the coming months. Other than that, it could simply be the case that users want to try something new. Apple's Mac OS is quite feature rich, and there are some pretty amazing Linux distros out there. Now, yeah, so the Windows 7, I think that they're onto something with Windows 7, the security patches, which you have to pay for now, those basically coming to an end. But it's more than that, because where I think the large percentage of market share loss for Windows is coming from, it is coming from Windows 7 coming to an end, maybe not exactly as much because of problems with Windows 10. And we already know that governments, fuck them, but governments are switching out of Microsoft's ecosystem en masse with the end of life of Windows 7, nigh. And like South Korea, I think was one of them. There's a bunch of countries that are basically switching over to Linux, and that's what's happening. As far as Mac OS share going up, I don't know exactly what's behind that. The only reason I ever think Mac OS share really goes up, because it's funny, because we were just talking a few years ago that Windows 10 is stealing creatives from Mac OS. Okay, so creatives are generally seemingly pissed off at the lack of attention, albeit feature rich, yes, but the lack of attention that Mac OS is getting, right? It'd be one thing. I'm intrigued that in these stats, going over to iOS was not counted, because with iPad, basically becoming a computer, and even more so in the past few months, that needs to be taken under consideration as to what's going on here. But Mac OS going up, I really think that always comes down to people buying iPhones and maybe buying an accompanying device, that does just a little bit more. I can't imagine a whole lot of people necessarily switching over to Mac OS. I'll say this: I'd rather people use Mac OS than Windows 10. I can't really believe I'm saying that, but I'll say it. Just because, again, Windows 10 has gotten so fucking bad. Microsoft's going to spend years cleaning up this mess, if they even can. Maybe they're just going to get out of the operating system game. And like we've predicted on this show, that eventually they may decide to completely open source Windows and just, make their money on the operating system side, make their money off of enterprise licenses, similar to a way that Canonical does, with offering tech support, for Ubuntu. And that's another thing too, is that these numbers, I think, would have included people, I think this would include people getting ready for 2004 of Ubuntu, which is a huge deal. And of course, I have been, pushing for people to get ready for and to start using it, because again, it's an operating system that's going to have 10 years of patches and updates, which is more so than most LTS versions of Ubuntu. That's really important. So anyway, I see this as, frankly, great news. Yes. Get off of Windows 10, or get off of Windows. If you're still on Windows 7, it's time to leave that behind. There's a great opportunity with Ubuntu 2004. Because that's the argument that a lot of people come up with, right? Is that, but Linux distros change so fast, with new versions, and when they come out every 6 months and so on. All right, well, don't worry about that. Just leave Ubuntu 2004 LTS, just leave it running as is, and just get the patches and security updates. and don't upgrade to any future version of it. And you're going to go for 10 years. I mean, it's such a tremendous, and it's free, for fuck's sake. It's such a tremendous deal. In fact, I just installed it. I mentioned earlier that I have a specific machine that I use for Tails. I mean, this is a super, super low end machine. It has, an eMMC drive. I mean, it's basically nothing to it. I installed 2004 on it. Runs like a fucking dream. Now, this computer came with Windows 10 on it. And I mean, slow as molasses. It has that really cheap it says it has 4 gig of RAM, but it's the really cheap stuff. It's a little Asus computer, which I think I talked about in a recent Q&A, the L203, because somebody actually asked me, okay, so if I wanted a dedicated Tails machine, what should I get? And this is basically what I recommended, because, you can get them for sub $200 or whatever. But I mean, you can put Ubuntu 2004 on that, no problem. You don't run into the storage space issues so much when you have Windows 10 installed. And I mean, it is, like lightning in comparison. I mean, it's just a great little Linux machine for under $200. Again, it's the L203. Make sure you get the latest one from Asus if you wanted to do that. But it's time to get off. Bottom line, time to get off. Anyway, I think that's enough for the foreplay right now. We'll be right back with some more Sovryn Tech. We'll get to our main story, and we'll be back with more.
Babylon 5 ended a great war and united 100 alien races in peace. Danger didn't die. It just went underground, with new heroes and new evils to carry the torch.
We need to make sure they all understand we will not be intimidated.
What is wrong with you people?
We have to protect him against himself.
It's an entire new season of Babylon 5, with all new episodes.
Babylon 5 is available for download on your favorite torrent site. See it now to experience the greatest show in television history. Babylon 5.
The main story.
It is time for the main story, and wow. When I said we had a lot to get into this week, this is one of those things where the culmination, so much that we talk about on this show, that we've talked about on this show for almost a decade now. I mean, it all just comes right here. And it plays off of, like I said, what was considered controversial based on some emails that I got of last week's topic around Twitter. People thought, you're just, I heard all kinds of things. One of the things I heard was, Stallion, you're just old, which I'm not that old. Stallion, you're just old. You don't understand what the kids are into today, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but that's the problem. It's not just fucking kids, right? It'd be one thing if, this is what the kids do today. But no, unfortunately, we live in a culture that is, sorry, that's another subject entirely. But a culture, I'll just say it quick, that has an obsession with perpetual youth. And I don't mean youth as in being vigorous. I mean youth as in 50-year-olds watching High School Musical, the series. What the fuck? But okay, whatever. Speaking of High School Musical, the series, that actually plays well into what we've got to talk about, and that is none other than Disney Plus. Now, this is not going to be me engaging in some 10 to 15 minute long screed about the poor shape of the entertainment industry, or should I say, when I say poor shape, I mean, sure, are they losing money? Yeah. But the lack of creativity in the entertainment space. That's not what I'm going to talk about here. It's not, I mean, it might come up, but it's not really relative to the problem that I have. But this is about Disney Plus. And actually, as we said in last week's episode, there are times where a tweet is really a news story. And this is another such case from Disney Plus. Now this was made on April 27th, 2020. Okay. But it is relevant it is something setting up for May 4th. Now, May the 4th is, okay. So longtime listeners know that I have historically, and I say historically, I have historically been a huge fan of Star Wars. I mean, I used to, when a new, and this is when Disney took over even in 2013, when a new Star Wars movie would come out, I would dedicate, I'd see it opening night, opening hour. I mean, as soon as I could possibly see it, I was going to see it. And I'd buy tickets months in advance, all over it, right? And I would do a review that week on Sovryn Tech. I would take half of an episode, and this is when Sovryn Tech was also running at 2 hours a show. So an entire hour of a Sovryn Tech Prime episode, which was, speaking of Prime, very prime real estate, especially when it came to advertisers and so on. But that's how serious I took Star Wars. It was a fucking event. It mattered. It was the stuff. Now Star Wars isn't my favorite franchise by any means. That, of course, that honor belongs to Babylon 5, and, Star Trek's right underneath there. Star Wars is certainly third rung. Of course, now it's fallen significantly from there. Even though Clone Wars. Anyway, yeah, big fan. Okay. And I mean, hell, I even do the show with my man Rob. We do TIE Fighter Renegades, which, I mean, we've opened that up a bit lately, but that was traditionally a Star Wars news show. I mean, that's how much I love Star Wars. So don't confuse me. Don't think somehow I hate Star Wars or blah, 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 or whatever here. I've used Disney Plus as well, just to, make that clear. And I did a review actually of Disney Plus when it first came out on this show. But anyway, so May the 4th is, and then that's like a whole hashtag, right? And that's kind of what we're going to talk about here. May 4th is a holiday. I think Hallmark really created it. I don't think it was actually like a fan made holiday. I think the clever marketers, and they are damned good at Hallmark. I think that they came up with it. I could be wrong about that, but anyway, it's been a thing for decades that it's supposed to be like May the 4th be with you, but instead it's May the 4th. Right. And then there's Revenge of the 5th and whatever. They have other ones. Who gives a rat's ass? But anyway, it's a thing. It's widely considered Star Wars Day, and businesses jump on it, right? Like, I mean, app stores will have Star Wars sales, gaming platforms will have sales for Star Wars games. Star Wars movies will be on sale, blah, 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 all this shit. Okay. And Disney has certainly taking advantage of this holiday, and frankly, this hashtag, which, I mean, in the years past, I have made, celebratory Star Wars posts on varying social media with this hashtag. So I get it. Anyway, let me read the tweet from April 27th, 2020, that Disney Plus, the official Disney Plus account made. Okay, actually, we have to read like 3 of them, but let's start with the first one. This is what started it all. Quote, celebrate the saga. Of course, they're talking about the Skywalker saga, right? All 9 movies. Yeah, anyway. Celebrate the saga. Reply with your favorite hashtag Star Wars memory, and you may see it somewhere special on hashtag May the 4th, period. Now that's the tweet. Okay. Now, as far as what this was for, I don't know, because May 4th has come and gone, and I'm not seeing anything. Maybe it's something that only appeared on Disney Plus. I'm not sure. Next few days, we might find out what it was. Maybe it had to be on Disney Plus. I don't know, but I have canceled all of my streaming services. So, I couldn't tell you anymore, but anyway, now, so there's that tweet. And so people were to respond to that with, I don't know, your Star Wars memory or something. Now that in and of itself, nothing wrong with that. Sure. They're probably going to do like some kind of special thing. I mean, I could imagine like a little 60-second video they would make with these responses. Maybe they would end up putting it on, I don't know, they put it on their YouTube channel, or again, on Disney Plus or on Twitter, who knows? That's fine. I don't really have any problem with that. But then here's where things get bad. In this thread of this tweet, it said Disney Plus responded with, by sharing your message with us using hashtag May the 4th. So if you use the hashtag May the 4th, okay, you agree to our use of the message and your account name in all media and our terms of use here. And then it goes to DisneyTermsOfUse.com, which that's amazing that they have an entire .com for that, but okay. So, and then people flipped, so basically what Disney Plus was doing is they were creating with a tweet. Okay. They were trying to create a legally binding contract that if you used by sharing, here, I'll read it for you. By sharing your message with us using hashtag May the 4th, you agree to our use of the message and your account name and all media in our terms of use here. And with Disney's termsofuse.com, basically when you go through the terms of use, the bottom line is, and I get what Disney was doing here. They were saying that if we use your tweet and somehow it's on something that we make money off of, which probably leads to the idea that it was going to be something on Disney Plus because you have to pay for that subscription, right? If you use that, okay, or you will not be able to, according to Disney's terms of use, basically you won't be able to sue Disney for monetary compensation, or you won't be able to request from Disney monetary compensation. Now, companies do this sort of thing all the time. For example, and this was controversial. In fact, I think this was over a decade ago. This was controversial at the time when Google Docs, the Instagram case is even better. But anyway, Google Docs, in their terms of service, they updated it so that if there is ever a leak of your data, or it's not even a leak, but if what you type into Google Docs somehow gets used by somebody else, okay, for example, say you wrote a movie script, okay, in Google Docs. You shouldn't, but if you did, say you wrote a movie script in Google Docs, and then you went and saw a movie. Of course, you can't do that right now, COVID-19, but if you went and saw a movie in theaters and you said, holy shit, I think they stole my script. You have no legal recourse against Google. Okay. And probably it wouldn't be against the studio either, because again, according to the terms of use, whatever you type into Google Docs, not necessarily that Google owns it, but you can't take any legal actions against it. Okay. Now I'm an anarchist. I don't care about taking legal actions anyway. I'll admit when I read this shit from Disney Plus, I was like, I hope everybody just starts suing them, even though I never argue for going to court for anything, but this is just so outrageous. Anyway, let's keep talking about it. The Instagram case was something too, where in Instagram's terms of service, basically they said, hey, we can use your photos for whatever we want, and you can't get monetary compensation because they're going to use your photos that you put on Instagram in ads. And it was a massive scandal. And this is akin to that. Now, that's one thing that you are getting an entire service, right? And the service is basically saying, hey, what you store on our servers, that's ours. You can kind of get away with some kind of legal mumbo jumbo argument where that could make sense to people who believe in legal frameworks, right? This, however, again, like I said, I get what they're doing. They don't want, if they use your Star Wars memory, whatever the fuck that is, okay? If they use that in their advertising or whatever, you can't get monetary compensation. Of course. It's not, I get where Disney's head was probably at with this. All right. Or what their intention was. But as the old saying goes, the road to hell is paved in what? Yes, exactly. Good intentions. But anyway, Disney tried to make a legally binding contract around the use of a hashtag. Now, they clarified underneath that because, again, the floodgates fucking opened up and people said, what are you talking about? Like, what do you mean that because I use hashtag May the 4th, which has been a part of Star Wars long before Disney owned it, okay, that somehow you own my tweet and it falls under your terms of service and not even under Twitter's terms of service? Well, they clarified a little bit and they said, because initially I think people were thinking, wait, if I use hashtag May the 4th anywhere, that Disney basically owns it and has the right to use it. Well, Again, they clarified. Let me read the other tweet here. The above legal language applies only to replies to this tweet using hashtag May the 4th and mentioning at Disney Plus. These replies may appear in something special on May the 4th, exclamation point. So, okay, so now for their clarification, okay, this legal language only applies to if you, A, use hashtag May the 4th, you're responding to this specific tweet, and you are mentioning specifically at Disney Plus. Like that has to be in there as well. Now, okay, I get it. That makes things sound a little more palatable, right? But this is still fucking ridiculous. Now, earlier, when I said that Twitter's being hypocritical, I mean, I feel like, and I say it's relevant to what we talked about last week, because as I brought up, and as I've brought up many times since 2016, frankly, and even before, the fact that the slapnuts in chief, President Trump, basically writes out foreign policy in 240 characters a shot or in a thread on Twitter, threatening violence against multiple countries, literally against millions of people around the world, it totally breaks Twitter's terms of service. And I've got to believe that, and I haven't looked into, and I've looked into some legal, or, people who do like legal podcasts, and commentators and everything on this. And basically they said, if Disney actually tried to, take this to court somehow, go to court about this, the judge would laugh them out of the courtroom, to say that they could make a tweet that is a legally binding contract. But I got to believe that if somebody else, if you or I tried to make this kind of claim that, hey, anybody responding to this using my hashtag or blah, 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 you suddenly come under my terms of use, you come under my contract, and I will take you to court if I use, because, there's scenarios that I can imagine where, I don't know, music gets shared or something like that. And then it becomes an issue too of like being ex post facto, right? Like Disney. So the initial tweet that Disney made was at 10 a.m. They were already getting replies before they clarified, what exactly what this meant, that by sharing your message with us, with hashtag May the 4th, that'd be a thing. Does this claim by Disney, does this hold true only to tweets that came after they clarified their language and said this falls under Disney's term of use, or what? There's all kinds of problems here, but bottom line being is that I guarantee you Twitter would probably ban the account that would try to make this sort of claim. But it's Disney, and they can get away with whatever. And look, this tweet is still, the link is in the show notes. The tweet's still there. And people tweeted at Twitter and Jack Dorsey, the CEO of Twitter, saying, hey, in fact, here it is. Hey, Twitter and at Jack Dorsey. At what point do you step in and specifically say that hashtags don't belong to anyone? This is, here's the problem. This is the point in civilization, you understand, that we have gotten to where corporations, mega corporations, if you want to go that far, somehow fucking think that, trademarks have been a thing, forever. Or not forever, but for a very long time. They're horseshit too, but they've been around for a very long time. You got to understand, like Twitter, to get the history of this, Twitter didn't invent the hashtag. Twitter users invented the hashtag. It became an easier way for you to search for things. It became a marketing tool later. But initially Twitter was, just basically the people who heard about it at South by Southwest. And that was when South by was more of a tech centric show. Of course, now it's just, well, it didn't even happen this year, but now it's just everything. The entertainment industry's there, whatever. And people have known for a long time that everybody goes to South by Southwest because they're hoping there'd be another success story like Twitter, which came out of South by Southwest, or which was announced there. So hashtags was a technical solution to search. It was not even marketing in the first place. Okay. So the idea of the one person who said, hey, Jack Dorsey, when do you say, hey, hashtags don't belong to anyone? Yeah, because it's not like Twitter doesn't have a, why can Google Plus implemented hashtags? Facebook has implemented hashtags. Instagram implemented hashtags. Why are all these different platforms that are competitors to Facebook or were, okay, or I mean to Twitter, I should say, why are they all able to implement hashtags? Why? Because it's not something that falls under any kind of actual copyright. Okay, it's not something that falls under any kind of IP law, the concept of the hashtag, because it's a technical solution. That'd be like, I mean, to some degree, people do copyright code. Yes, I understand that, but this is ridiculous. I don't care what Disney's intentions were. The bottom line is they think that they can say XYZ in a tweet and somehow that becomes law. That becomes a legally binding contract. And how far does this go? Yes, I agree. I mean, I agree with the legal commentators that this would get laughed out of court. Of course it would. But what's the fucking mindset with these companies thinking that they can even do this? That's always the problem, right? Like, this is the same thing. This is the same argument that people give me with, with politicians. Like, if you knew all of the dumb ass bills that get pushed, into Congress in the U.S. alone, I mean, it's mind boggling, right? And you're going to read just like the dumbest things, that maybe have to do with, I don't know, medical rights of some kind. I mean, just really asinine shit that's out there. And everybody says, it's like, yeah, okay, that's a stupid bill, but it's never going to get past the House, or it's never going to, yeah, I hear you. And you're probably right that it's never going to get past the House, or in this case, it's going to get laughed out of court. But that doesn't speak to the problem. The problem is there are morons who think this way. There are morons who think that somehow that stupid bill was a good idea because they bothered to write it. There are morons who think that they can actually control a hashtag and have a bunch of people, have potentially millions of people fall under their fucking legal binding contract just by using a goddamn hashtag. That is the problem. Is that people think that way. I mean, I could get into an entire screed about the entertainment industry. I mean, who made Star Wars a fiscally viable thing? Who made Star Trek a fiscally viable thing? Was it CBS? Was it Disney? Was it whoever owns whatever, HBO and Game of Thrones? I mean, no, fuck nut. It's the fans that love this shit, right? Now, I mean, if you've got the original creator there who came up with the idea in the first place, that turns into a different conversation. But look, mega corporations don't own this shit. They can try all they want, but they don't. This is the problem with contract. I mean, Disney should be not just laughed out of court, they should be laughed out of existence for trying to control you and own your speech just by putting out a tweet that says, aha, yes, if you use hashtag May the 4th, or if you respond to us, positive or negative, we own your words. I haven't seen that kind of royal hubris in a long time to think that. That's like the Queen of England thinking she owns all the swans on the planet. No, she really does. That's not a joke. That's law, folks. I'm fortunately, relieved that most of the people that responded to this tweet were basically insulting the fuck out of Disney, saying, who the hell do you think you are? And I'm glad that at least, people realize that, that no, you can't do that, Disney. I'm sorry. You don't own my words like that if I use that hashtag. But this is how these companies think that they're countries. They think that somehow they are, practically like a law enforcement agency. I mean, Disney's a unique case where, in fact, Rob and I talked about this on a recent TIE Fighter Renegades where, in many ways, basically they're their own country. It's crazy. But this is what it's come to. And it's no surprise that you have the president of the United States thinking that he can basically lay out foreign policy on there too, and that gets, treated like policy. I mean, if that's the case, then I think we got to take this platform a lot more fucking seriously than people generally do, because it usually just gets treated like a joke. And I'm not saying that it's a good thing that we should be taking it more seriously. It shouldn't be, but this is where we're at. And it speaks to, because, let's be clear here. There's, again, because of the hypocrisy of this, because if you or I tried to do this and tried to go to court with it, Twitter would get involved, and I guarantee you they're not going to be on your side, right? This is more of that unholy alliance going on, and the hypocrisy of Twitter. The company needs to be held accountable for, really, not the users necessarily. The company needs to be held accountable for what the fuck these users are doing. And until they take down Disney or the president or others, from having their accounts, from engaging in, because look, any law is effectively a threat of violence, right? We know this. Because every law ultimately comes down to what? You go to jail. If you refuse to go to jail, what happens? You get shot. Disney threatened violence on every Star Wars fan on the planet. You understand that? And Twitter asked to respond to that, and Twitter did nothing. Now, what's the solution here? I'm not saying stop using Twitter. I sure as fuck am saying stop giving Disney any goddamn money. Stop giving Disney fucking anything. Don't give them, any real attention. And if you're a Star Wars fan and you're still engaging in, in wanting your Star Wars and all this stuff, look, this gets into funny territory, right? Because again, mega corporations don't own this stuff. Okay. And hey, you want it, what is it? They're re-releasing Racer on Switch on May 12th. And if you buy that, you're going to give Disney some money. Yeah, sure. But look, Racer existed before Disney was around. You existed before Disney, or you were a Star Wars fan before Disney owned the franchise. It's for you to do and whatever. But to minimize giving this company, mind share, attention share, money share, or, monetary share, all of which really are one thing today, because we always seem to have a screen in front of our fucking face with this horse shit. Yeah, I think that that's a fine and dandy idea. Don't give them the power, and if you want to go on there and make fun of them, I guess certainly that's something to do as well. And the other thing to do is to let people know, no, do you realize Disney thought that they could do this? And this is nothing new for Disney. Frankly, Disney never gives credit to anybody, right? They never give credit in their animated films, which are considered, classics. They never give credit to the original people that wrote the original concepts, say for Snow White or Robin Hood, or go down the list of movies that, that they make. So yeah, just anybody that engages in this, call them out for it. And just stop giving them, again, your attention. And that comes in a lot of different shapes and sizes. So, all right. Anyway, and I know that gets into a fuzzy area, right? Because this is a bigger conversation, and it's one that really I should have with Rob on TIE Fighter Renegades. Because if I love Star Trek, I hate CBS, and CBS has done horrendous, terrible things with my beloved franchise, with my beloved stories, with the creation of Gene Roddenberry. Okay. And horrendous. But so if I talk about Star Trek positively, even though I'm talking about stuff that existed before CBS owned it, more or less. Okay. That whole legal history is a whole other ball game. Am I supporting CBS? No. But then that's the thing, is we kind of have to change how we think about a lot of these stories. These stories can belong to the creator, and these franchises can belong to their creator in a way. There shouldn't be any legal IP law against anyone, running with it. In fact, Gene Roddenberry was hugely supportive of fan fiction and spoke very kindly of it. And I don't think he would have cared if anybody made money off of it. That's for the studios. They're the assholes. But anyway, the creator can have some ownership around their idea, because, they're going to come out with, or, maybe they have plans for it and so on. But these mega corporations that just buy it out from George Lucas or Gene Roddenberry or however that goes, fuck them. They don't own shit. When the creator is no longer involved, it belongs to the people that love it at that point, in my opinion. But then ownership and all these things are also huge. Those are very loaded terms that we would need to discuss. But anyway, I don't want to go down that road. I want to shift gears a little bit here, because I found something interesting, because the Twitter conversation last week went into 5G. And so I'm going to squeeze this in here. In fact, I talked about this on a Q&A, which you can listen to all Q&As totally for free now. And I talked about how Muscle and Fitness magazine, which has just been a staple, the magazine has been a staple in the fitness and bodybuilding world for decades. I've been reading it since I was a teenager. Well, it's no longer a magazine. Now they've basically switched to, all right, everything's online and blah, blah, and we're not charging for it, yada, yada, yada. And I had a subscription to Muscle and Fitness magazine, of course, because I'm into fitness very much. And they told me, well, now you're going to get issues of Men's Journal to finish out your subscription. Well, obviously I don't want Men's Journal. I don't give a shit, but I got my first issue in, and I was reading through it, and there was an interesting little piece in there that I think may speak to some of what we talked about last week. And this is, here it's titled, and it's just a one-pager. A Luddite's Guide to 5G. Again, this is on one page. That's it. It's not even a full story. Well, in a magazine, one page can be a whole story. But here we go. I want to read it to you, okay? So you don't have to touch the magazine when you go to the store, or you don't have to, whatever, you don't have to buy it. How it works. 1, 5G runs on high-frequency waves with high data capacities with relatively short ranges. 2, as a result, 5G cell towers will run along city streets, connecting self-driving cars, security cameras, and traffic lights. Now, let's stop on number 2. Of course, that points at, I think, another part of why 5G is getting so pushed, because we were discussing that last week, how it's so weird how this technology is being so pushed so hard. Like there really hasn't been a technology quite like it in some decades that was so hard pushed on everybody. Well, I think these self-driving cars, see, because now 5G, is meant to be basically everywhere, right? It's not like just where there's a tower every so many miles, like with 4G. 5G is supposed to be able to bounce off of any device that has a 5G antenna. Okay. And, for self-driving cars to work, now we see part of where this is important, right? And where this becomes a security issue, because self-driving cars will probably use 5G signals, which are bouncing off of everywhere and identified on every device. This should scare you, but anyway, every device is identified. And so the self-driving car will recognize and know where it's at and know when to turn and where to stop and blah, 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 and where things are. I mean, it'll be a huge boon, I admit, for the self-driving car industry, which I think should not even be an industry, but that's another conversation for another time. Anyway, that's a start to speak to it. Let's go to number 3. 5G small cells on streetlights will also help boost cell coverage. Again, these things are going to be everywhere. They're going to be in street lamps. Okay, reading on. So at least they're honest about that part. So it's a jargon-free primer on the next generation wireless network by Mia Mercado. Here we go. First, there was 1G, and it sucked. This first... Okay, compared to what? This first-gen network was what Gordon Gekko's blocky cell phone used in the 80s. Now, 5G's blistering speeds threaten to make our 4G current networks as archaic as Reagan-era tech. Here's how it could change your life. Okay, now when we did our coverage of 5G, which had nothing to do with health concerns, had entirely to do with practicality of the technology and privacy concerns. That's all that we brought up. And that's all that I've brought up. I have not brought up health concerns around 5G. I have not discussed health. I mean, I might have mentioned that people say something about it. I have not shared my opinions on health concerns with 5G. I have not shared whether I back any health concerns or, backing ideologically or, well, you know what I mean? Whether or not I am supportive of anybody raising health concerns with 5G, blah, blah, blah. I have not done any of that on this show, ever. You understand? I've mentioned it, but it's not something where I have, come down with my own opinion on it. Now, if you don't want me to even mention that sort of thing, okay, fine. Then, we won't talk about it. We'll just, whatever, anyway. But okay, so now this claim here: 5G's blistering speeds threaten to make our 4G current networks as archaic as Reagan era tech. Reagan era tech is not archaic, but okay. Anyway, I mean, fuck Reagan, but 5G speeds are on the consumer end, for the end user. There is no appreciable difference between 5G and 4G. Okay. This blistering speed argument is nonsense. And that was the main point. And I went by the numbers when we reviewed it on Sovryn Tech. Okay. I went by the numbers on the matter. There's no appreciable difference for the consumer. This part's a lie. Okay. Blistering speeds? Yeah, sure, they're blistering speeds, but comparing them to 4G, again, for the end user, there's no difference. Anyway, let's go to their next bit here. 1, transportation. If you just felt something that was all of Silicon Valley fist bumping because self-driving, or wait, let's see. Yeah, if you just felt something that was all of Silicon Valley fist bumping because self-driving cars will be a reality with 5G. Unfortunately, wireless providers might need years to build the needed infrastructure for these vehicles. Stallion breaking in. I hope they take their time. Number 2, public safety. 5G will play a huge role in disaster response and prevention. Mostly by seamlessly linking public safety communications such as ambulances, dam sensors, and traffic lights. Yeah, but when you add in contact tracing, I wonder about that. Anyway, number 3, home. Smart home networks will have the capacity to handle a constant, large flow of data from tiny sensors in air filters, light bulbs, and HVAC units to help improve a dwelling's safety and energy-saving capabilities and allow the perverts in government to know everything that you're doing. Oh, wait, that's not in here. Sorry. If it's the Luddites guide, I think it should be, but anyway, they skipped that part. Number 4, work. Prepare to say goodbye to super laggy video conferencing and hello to 3D hologram meetings with your boss and colleagues thanks to 5G supported augmented reality. Now that part, yeah, I imagine that's going to be a thing since you have, the signal just bouncing around from fucking everywhere, that you would have the bandwidth. Again, the speed doesn't increase with 5G necessarily. The only increase in speed is more, it's like the difference between CPU and RAM, right? Where you're going to have more signal coming in, but not necessarily faster signal. Okay. But anyway, we'll keep going from there. Number 5, entertainment. These days, streaming Succession without it, I don't know what the fuck that is. It's a show because it's in italics, I guess. Without any glitches seems more far-fetched than autonomous cars. 5G should eliminate such server overloads and take only 5 seconds to download super high-def movies. That's like all of the Transformers movies in less time than it takes to nuke a Hot Pocket. I mean, there's an easy solution to that. You don't have to stream anything. Just if you're into super high def, buy a 4K disc. That's a lot simpler, a lot cheaper, and for the end user, for the consumer, they can actually hold on to the movie for all time. And fuck, if 4K was put on M-Disc technology, shit, I mean, it might cost you $20, but you have it for 1,000 years. What a great idea that would be. Oh, no. We can't have that. We got to have people watching shit while they're on the go. Oh, yeah, don't have them pay attention while they're walking or while they're driving. Or, well, I mean, that's part of why it's self-driving cars are there, right? Because you got this huge windshield in front of you that could be a screen showing you ads. And right now it's not. And God damn it, we have to change that. I love this. Anyway, here's where it gets really interesting, though. Fuck all that. My criticisms are sound, but let's go to the next bit here. 2 controversies to keep an eye on. I'm holding it up right here. It's Men's Journal. It is the May. Where does it say what issue it is? Well, whatever. It's the May 2020 issue, so it probably means it's like the June or July. Yeah, May, June 2020. That's what it says. Okay, this is the May, June 2020 issue. Men's Journal is saying this, not Sovryn Tech. Men's Journal is saying this. 2 controversies to keep an eye on. 1, International espionage. Tech giant Huawei is building a massive 5G network throughout much of the world. The U.S. government isn't exactly thrilled about this, given Huawei's coziness with the Chinese government and the risk of companies and citizens being spied on with Huawei gear. What about the U.S. government's coziness with Silicon Valley and the U.S. government's plans to roll out 5G? So here's what I want. The U.S. government, you tell me why you're concerned about Huawei having this massive 5G network. And then you tell me why I shouldn't be concerned about you having the very same thing which you are also building. Explain it to me. Do I have to say Edward Snowden? Crickets. I don't think that here's the thing. This point for number one about spying on you, about lack of privacy, about security concerns, I think those are probably totally valid. I imagine if a U.S. government representative was right here and explained it to me why they're concerned about Huawei having all this and their coziness to the Chinese government, I imagine I would completely agree with every statement that comes out of their mouth. And then I would completely turn it around on them and say, but what about you? Look who's in office. Look who's in command of the guns, right? Because like Barack Obama said, government is the monopoly use and force. Sovryn Tech didn't have to say it. I didn't have to tell you that there are privacy concerns around this. Men's Journal is fucking telling you that there is. They just don't want to admit that every government's the bad guy, not just the Chinese government. Number two. Let's go to number two of the controversies. Dangerous cell waves. This isn't some book called EMF. This isn't some crackpot like Dr. Mercola or anything. This isn't Sovryn Tech. This is Men's Journal. Look through the rest of this magazine. You understand? Believe me, when I was looking through it, the next page is about a Corvette. This is the most banal, most... I looked through everything on here. Was this selling me jeans? I mean, those things should last forever. And, they're selling me rackets for a good tennis match. And this is so reinforcing of the status fucking quo. There's not a goddamn bit of controversy in this entire magazine. It is mindless consumerism and worse. And yet here they are with number two, dangerous cell waves. Let's read it. Concerns have emerged about possible health risks from 5G's extremely high-frequency waves known as waves. Though it seems unlikely normal exposure levels pose a serious threat to humans, more research is needed. I'm not talking about Nor's Men's Journal. No one's talking about, like this, coronavirus is coming from 5G or what, blah, 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 or, however they want to frame it, that no, 5G is just weakening immune systems where coronavirus is more deadly, or, whatever the fuck they want to say about it, right? No one's going there. I have not made any kind of statement on the health, like I said, on the health concerns around 5G. But I got flack for that, for even a whiff of me doing so. You want to go attack Men's Journal? Or are they owned by? Are they owned by Ziff Davis? I'm not sure. Probably one of those big magazine magnates, which are dying anyway, or at least in this country, at least in the United States. But why don't you go after them? Why don't you cancel your subscription to them? Go tell them to fuck off. I'll admit it. When I read this, I was completely surprised. I was like, holy shit, they're admitting to these two issues. Sovryn Tech's more concerned with number one, but then they also brought up number two. I'm in awe that's part of the conversation for Men's Journal, for something so basic, something so, part of the system. And it really is. You read the rest of the articles in there, like I said, you're just going to hurl, you're going to puke from it. But they said more research is needed. Well, how about we go ahead and, we get some of that research done then? I'm just saying, I'm just going off of what Men's Journal said. This is not Sovryn Tech. I'm just saying that, yeah, all right, let's do a little more research before you put it into my Samsung Galaxy, shine it twice and put it up my ass. Would that be all right? Or, do you ban me from Twitter, and do you ban me from every other network while you don't ban Disney for pointing a gun at everybody that used a hashtag? Go ahead, ban me, ban Sovereign Tech, ban people that ask these fucking kinds of questions. Fuck you. I'll be right back with more Sovereign Tech. Hey, if you have a project that needs reliable cryptocurrency data, check out blocktap.io. Blocktap.io is a universal cryptocurrency API. You can get historical prices for Bitcoin and other digital assets that you can use to build charts and do market analysis. Blockchain data is also indexed, so you can get transaction statistics, address balances, and more for Bitcoin and other networks. Blocktap.io is free for personal use, and you don't even need to create an account to access the API. To get started, try some of the example queries on the homepage at blocktap.io. Again, that's blocktap.io, blocktap.io, and we thank them for sponsoring Sovereign Tech. Woo, let's get back to the show.
Issues of privacy, security, and social engineering. It's HackSec.
It is time for HackSec, and really, we got into HackSec in around the whole 5G conversation in the last segment. But this is gonna kind of double up on this, because we also have a great important message that I want to get into that really could be relevant to HackSec as well. But someone brought up in the Telegram group a great point. Well, initially I found out, and I'll keep people, you can join the Telegram group and see for yourself, but I'll keep names anonymous here. I like to do that anyway, unless you specifically want me to mention you, and then I will, but otherwise I keep you anonymous, including when you ask questions. Anyway, a conversation came up around masks, and a great listener had, and I'm going to read some of this like a transcript. And I asked, like, do you guys mind if I use this in the show? And they said, yes. They said, no problem. So because, I'm not some asshole like Disney who will say, hey, if you post it in here, this belongs to me and I'm going to put it on my show. God damn it. No, I'm a fucking respectful human being. I know those are few and far between. And this actually bolsters the point, because a great listener started off with this. This kind of got the conversation going. He said, damn, anti-maskers, as in people who are against wearing masks during our present COVID-19 situation. Anti-maskers are out there acting like complete assholes. Ridiculing someone's decision to wear a mask is apparently what passes for activism these days. I responded to this and said, it's like, this is, I could read exactly what I said, but my basic point is that why are people, because I know my show is popular in varying activist circles with a lot of different stripes, red, yellow, green, blue, orange even. I'm sure there's some kind of mauve version of anarchy or something out there, but okay. I know I run in a lot of different circles. So activists of many stripes. And I basically said, he's like, this is the one time, in my opinion, because something I have espoused for a while and that I talked about recently on an episode of Sovereign Tech in relevance to, COVID-19. I said, this is a golden opportunity where culturally it's acceptable to wear a face covering. It's practically government policy, or at the very least government supported to do so. Okay. And it's advantageous. Don't even have to talk about health. Don't even have to talk about COVID-19. It's advantageous because it fucks with facial recognition software. Okay. Which certainly 5G is going to help with that, right? Because then you don't even have to recognize the face. You can just recognize all the little 5G repeaters, or whatever they did, however they decide to set this up, but all the different 5G devices out there, they can just track you with those. They, them, those, right? We know what we mean by that. But this is just a great opportunity to where we can reclaim some privacy where it has been, taken away. And again, no need to even get into a health concern, even though I think, that there are certainly, I even supported the notion of, look, even if it's not, an N95 plus mask, wear a face covering anyway, because that at least sends the, even a social signal, right? Of, hey, let's be careful right now because we don't want to contract this or that. And I think personally, I think that's fine. Okay. Again, not even getting into, the reality of COVID-19 or health concerns. We don't even have to go anywhere near any of that to talk about this. Okay. I think this person was referencing had a very good reason to be wearing a mask, because look, folks, immunocompromised people, that's a real deal. Anyway. So I said that I was like, they're missing out on a golden opportunity to wear a mask. Whether you believe COVID-19 is a conspiracy or whatever the fuck you think about it, it's a great opportunity for completely other reasons to wear, it's a good idea to wear a mask when you're in a store or wherever else, right? Again, for privacy concerns alone. So then another brilliant listener said, I'm reading from him. I was completely pro-mask before this. Having gone through a period of most people wearing masks, I'm finding it to be very socially isolating. I underestimated the impact of seeing people's faces and exchanging expressions with strangers. In general, I am still pro-mask, but now feel that it risks losing some sense of essential human connection with strangers. And then I think he continued, perhaps this is something that just stands out of lack of experience reading facial expressions through masks, but I think that dehumanizing aspects should be investigated. And then other people responded, this is a great point. There are certainly trade-offs. And there's some other things I'm going to read here from other listeners in this. But I think this is an interesting point getting raised. Now, I have heard that, and percentages are always kind of BS, but basically if it's over 50, it's interesting. Over or under 50 is where it gets interesting. 90% of human communication is done without words. That's a statistic I've heard, and I believe that. Okay. I've never, ever liked, I don't even like video conferencing because I think you lose so much in that. So much comes with, it's not even the words. Perhaps it's intonation. Perhaps it's a gleam in the eye. Perhaps it's the motion of the mouth, or, are they smiling or blah, blah, blah. I think this person is absolutely right in that you are losing a lot of social cues when people wear a mask. Are there other cues that we can pick up on? If we got used to a world where everybody had half their face covered, yes, I imagine that there is. But this is an important thing to bring up. And there are, this is part of where. Now, when the second time, so the first time we talked about COVID-19 on Sovryn Tech, I basically gave, and it was based upon a question that was asked of me. How would you prepare for this sort of thing? If this is a worst case scenario pandemic, blah, 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 what do you do? And we broke that down. Second time we talked about it, I got into what I think would actually perhaps, what could be, or actually I think it was in a Q&A where I was responding to a question there as well, as far as, what can be done about this, blah, blah, blah. And, the importance of getting accurate information, and not just accurate information, but also local information. Okay. And an aspect that I think a lot of people ignore is the importance of, because on a national level, you can look at this from a tech angle. You can look at this on Google Maps. This has been an open secret with Google Maps for a very long time, is that on a very local level, it doesn't do a great job. And it never has. And they've been trying to enhance that for a long time. That's the whole reason they came up with Ingress and Pokemon Go, was to improve local tracking data. Basically anybody playing those are, only improving the surveillance state, but regardless, at a local level, things become far more difficult unless, again, you're actually there. Okay. And so local information is this thing that is not, and social media sucks at this. Because social media, again, most people, how do they interact on social media? Well, they go after a hashtag, right? And a small town probably isn't going to get its own hashtag very easily unless it's the entire country for some reason talking about some small town. But a small town talking about itself is not going to pop up on Twitter as somehow relevant. Okay, so getting local information is an incredibly important thing, and especially in this time, because locally is in many ways where it counts for people. And so I said, one of the worst things that could be done out of this, or, out of the response, what has been the, shall I say, the mainstream response to COVID-19 is that it's separating people. Now, I mean, I get it, why it's like, telling people to stay in their homes and so, and do this, blah, 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 and maybe socially distance a little bit or whatever. I understand the idea of not spreading the disease and all that, but that doesn't mean we still don't, want, because at one point for a couple weeks there, it was like people weren't even leaving their houses and they weren't even talking to people, right? Or they weren't talking to people in person. And I think that was in many ways a barrier to getting local information, right? Like I compared it to, this is the importance of, and again, folks, I am not pro-church in any way. But this was the advantage of the church a couple hundred years ago, was that it was a way for locally for you to get the information of what's going on, and that we're kind of missing that. I don't want churches to be the arbiter of that sort of thing, but you get my point, okay, in the abstract of, what's going on there. And I say all this to get to the point of that there was a time there was a moment where the thought crossed my mind that this is, you look at like a lot of science fiction movies and shows and everything, and how everything's so sterile and people don't really touch each other and all this. Human touch. So this is nothing new for Sovryn Tech. I have said for years on this show that the world is suffering from largely two things. There's more, but two things that the world is really suffering from. One is nobody tells each other how they really feel. Two is touch, which is actually directly correlative to number one. Okay. There's a lack of touch in the world. And if you are looking for understanding and empathy in situations, now again, I get it. I understand why people weren't touching each other. I'm not speaking against that, but I am just saying that a lack of closeness, of contact, of reading people. And I have spoken out against social media saying, no, this is harmful for communication because it doesn't allow for the complete breadth of communication, right? Which again, 90% of it isn't even done through words. That we are losing a lot. So I respect and appreciate the point that this listener is bringing up. Okay. That like he's having a hard time, reading, that there's a lot of social cues that are being missed. And in the workplace, like I could see where that could be a very, very real concern. In the home and in, shall we say, more local gatherings and so on. Okay. Do we really need the mask when it's with such and so many people? We can get into a huge conversation around the Dunbar number with all of this, and something we've talked about many times on this show. But I get where he's coming from, that you do lose that when everybody wears a mask. Okay. Now eliminate surveillance society. And then, my concerns around wearing a mask, or my positive arguments that exist outside of medical ones, or at least outside of COVID-19, they would basically fall away. If those elements, the, surveillance society elements, weren't there, but they are. And I think that I guess what I want to say to his point, I'll read some more here, but what I want to say to his point is I agree with him that we do lose something. And it's important to understand just how much goes into communication between one human being to another. It is not just words. We cannot do it with text. That's not new information on Sovryn Tech, right? We've said this is one of the reasons I've constantly railed against social media and even talking online in general, is because there's so much communication that you completely fucking miss. And that leads to misunderstandings, and misunderstandings often generally leads to some kind of problem, right? I suppose there have been fortuitous instances that have come out of misunderstandings, but by and large, that leads to problems. So yeah, I don't think you're wrong, in that it does create that issue, but I would suggest, and because I think this is important to bring up, I would suggest that in the present, we have the COVID-19 situation, not even talking about that, the surveillance society situation that we live in. I would suggest that wearing a mask is, I think the trade, there are trade-offs. I think the trade-offs go in favor of wearing the mask. And the listener even said he's still, mostly pro-mask. I think the trade-offs go towards that wearing the mask is the, dare I say, the better part of valor than not. And that's not even getting into the whole medical thing. I mean, a commonplace thing that people used to wear, for not even centuries, frankly, for thousands of years. I mean, you can go back to, the Greeks, ancient Romans, they would wear cloaks, right? This is incredibly commonplace and really has only fallen out, frankly, in the past century. Only 100 years that this isn't something that's more commonplace. Now, cloaks by design, and you can read, I've even read like Civil War journals, or from that era, right? Because so many people were writing down how they felt and everything. So we have a lot of those. It's not to venerate that time in any way. But at that time, people were wearing them then, and you can read where they say, yeah, it was, basically to hide. They just didn't even want to get recognized around town, or they wanted to get left alone, etc. And that was basically accepted. And so I think what I'm saying in that is that there was a time where you couldn't see people's faces, and that had a certain like that was a cue in and of itself, right? But it was one that I think if rights were a thing, that you'd have the right to have. And I don't think the listener would argue with me on that either. But the idea that, people would basically hide their face, it was incredibly, incredibly commonplace, and it's really, there's only been any kind of change in the past 100 years. In fact, I think, and I've felt this way for a while, that the falling out of the cloak, out of fashion. In fact, I'm just instantly thinking of Jeffrey Tucker and him wanting all of his capes again, right? Which, hey, fine. I'm totally on board with that. People wearing capes, go for it. But that falling out of fashion, I often wonder if that wasn't, I'd build a conspiracy around that. Because this idea of being able to recognize people through some kind of surveillance technology, that's been around for decades on its own. And probably not too far off from when, again, cloaks were very much falling out of fashion, or not even, it'd still be surveillance, not necessarily a technology, but to very much, thwart, riots or other kinds of activism that would go on, especially in the early part of the 20th century. Yeah, I could imagine big businesses were like, hey, get rid of these cloaks, get rid of these things that cover people. People would still, wear bandanas and things like this, and, go down the fucking list. But I could build a conspiracy, frankly, around that if I wanted to. So anyway, let me read a little bit more about the pro and anti-mask, and we could talk about that a little bit more. Let's see. Here's another listener. I am only pro-mask, and when it is circumstantially appropriate to wear them. Like if I'm going into Costco or one of the stores in the large town around here where I know a lot of people are and have been, then I will wear a mask. But that is the only circumstance in my current life situation that I will wear a mask. Okay, fair enough. Next one. This is from the same person, and it is the situational awareness that I think everybody needs to be encouraged to engage. However, that's just not entertaining enough for the news media. Right. Yeah. You got to make a big deal out of all this stuff. Right. Let's see. I wear a mask at work now. This is someone else with a mask. I can't smile at coworkers. It feels like the mask is a wall. I totally get these ideas, and it does feel like a wall, and it does in some ways, I think, speak against a real solution for getting through a time like this. And that is connecting, right, with people. And, every technological means that we have is really piss poor. And the mask can really, get in the way of that. But then I think this is also a time very much to reflect on that fact and to take notice of the importance of getting to connect with people and this sort of thing. So yeah, there's trade-offs here. Again, I'm on the side of, well, I'd rather covering your face being a norm that's accepted than not. Okay. As far as being forced to wear them at work and things like this, I mean, that's a very different conversation to be had, but that's not really what's being had here. It's the lack of signals that you get when conversing with another human being, and how uncomfortable that can be. I think overall, in my opinion, I totally agree with you. And I know that happens. I mean, Ellen and I, we were going shopping, and it was a minor annoyance because, like, we're constantly touching and kissing each other, and we were there wearing a mask. And again, as I said, I wear it because I love getting for it to be culturally accepted and, to fuck with facial recognition technology. I think that's dynamite. Health concerns totally aside, but we can't really kiss each other, right? With the masks on, or at the very least it looked like ninjas kissing or something, which actually that's kind of hot, but you get my point. So, it can create a division, a wall against closeness. And that can be a real problem. And I think it's a fair point to bring up. I think that the other point that's important is situational awareness. Yeah. Like, what situation is it required and not? But I definitely want to see facial coverings becoming the norm, or in the current climate, the current world that we live in. And I don't mean COVID-19. I mean the surveillance society that we live in. So I thought it was a great point to bring up. It's something I wanted to converse about. That's just my opinion on it. I don't disagree with him. I totally get what he's saying. I think this is a matter of where, okay, with the trade-offs, with the cost benefit analysis, I think the benefits outweigh the cost. So there we go. The potential negatives in this case. So, all right. Anyway, we'll be right back with some more Sovryn tech, a lot more to talk about. Woo!
We don't have to what? What do you mean you don't have to take your clothes off? What a bunch of Okay, no, you don't have to take your clothes off to have a good time, but come on, we all want to, don't we? Who writes lyrics like that? I can't believe it. Anyway, let's get back to Sovryn Tech.
Now entering the gaming grid. The latest gaming news, reviews, and retro culture, as only the man of tomorrow can deliver. And here's your host, Brian Sovryn.
Woo, all right, let's have some fun, shall we? Because that whole segment was basically like, it was, kind of listener email as well as a security issue, as pertains to facial recognition technology. We'll run with that as being like part of our Q&A. So we're going to skip the Q&A segment on this episode. I think it was important to get that conversation out there. So let's get into some gaming grid, some game talk here. And boy, what a week. Talk about just from a tech angle, not even from a game playing angle. There was a leak, and I still haven't heard where, I don't know who's claimed this, who's taking credit for the leak, but there was a massive leak of data about the Wii. In fact, full code, full breakdown of the hardware, everything is out there now as far as that goes. And not just for the Wii, but also for the N64, the GameCube. I mean, this is source code. It all got leaked online. Remarkable. Just it appeared on 4chan. I don't think it's uninteresting that once that happened, suddenly and there's a link in the show notes talking about this, we have a fully functional port for the PC of Super Mario 64, which plays in 4K, ultra widescreen, the whole thing. It uses DirectX 12, which I think that was a little bit of a fail. So this more or less only works on Windows, but I installed it. I checked it out. You kind of have to look around a bit for the code because obviously Nintendo's going to shoot it down like a hammer, or hammers don't shoot unless you're a hammer brother. Woo, how's that for a little Mario? Anyway, it's out there to play and it's pretty stunning. And I got to admit, and I know I'm not the only one who said this, the port of Mario 64 and I wasn't playing it at 4K, but I have a very high resolution monitor. I mean, it's higher than 1080p. And I was playing it on there. It's amazing how good those graphics actually look and play. Even, I mean, we're talking about a game from what, 1996? I was stunned at how, because the graphics, they didn't improve the graphics at all. And they still looked, very blocky and everything. But this is a point I've brought up on previous gaming grids where the more polygons, it seems, sharper edge polygons that a game has from the past, the better it actually looks today. I think it still looks good. It's when 3D was trying to become more realistic that it seems to fall apart. But when you have the polygons, it still kind of holds up. Where when you see there's a lot of polygons, but when you see all the connecting points and everything, somehow it still has a great style to it. But anyway, it's going to be interesting to see what comes of this. I am hopeful that there's going to be some amazing FPGA boards and some great hardware emulation that will come out of the fact that the source code for the N64, the GameCube, and the Wii have all come out. Do I think Nintendo's behind it? Because actually somebody asked me that. Like, did they leak it themselves? I don't think that's not their style. They don't do that sort of thing. Not this kind of leak. I can't picture that. But do I think the emulation community is definitely going to take advantage of it? And Nintendo is probably going to lose some revenue out of the matter because we are expecting sooner or later for Switch Online to emulate or have available N64, GameCube, and Wii games. I mean, I think most people just feel like it was a matter of time. Yeah, I don't know, but definitely exciting times for everything that's going to come out from this because now you have the source code. Now you can do just about anything as far as that goes. So interesting stuff. I put the link in the show notes for that. I do want to give a bit of okay. Well, no, I had another story here too. Vader Immortal. The singular reason, in my opinion, to get, because it was exclusive, the singular reason to get the Quest, the Oculus Quest VR headset was Vader Immortal. It has now been announced that it's going to be coming out for PlayStation VR. The Oculus Quest gave it the old college try, and I was really excited about the platform in general. Of course, not any longer ever since John Carmack left the project, and I talked about that on an episode of Sovryn Tech. But if you have no console exclusives, you just don't have a chance. You don't have a chance in hell of getting anywhere. So the Oculus Quest, in fact, a listener did a great review of it, and I agree. It's a great idea and concept and everything, and I was excited about it for a time. But if they're not going to be able to even keep Star Wars games locked down, and it's probably because it just hasn't sold as well, even though I know there's pretty high demand, especially right now. Boy, talk about something that's isolating, right? VR headsets have got to be going through the roof right now with people stuck at home. But anyway, yeah, losing your console exclusives, I don't see this taking off. And there's a big conversation that we could have around that. Maybe we'll have it in a future gaming grid. But as soon as I saw that, I was, head in hand. It's like, oh, fuck. Way to go, Oculus. You just lost. But or at least you're not going to have like a dominant share. And it's funny too, because John Carmack came out and said they thought that the competition for the Oculus Quest really was the Nintendo Switch. That's who they were competing against, not the PlayStation. Well, the PlayStation just sucked up your market share, quite frankly. So anyway, I'll get into, why don't we go ahead and do this? A quick mini review, very, very quick, because it's going to be relevant to our album of the week. And that is for what I think, and I've actually read other people mention it, something I think that could be game of the year. And that is Streets of Rage 4. It finally came out. I've played it on the Nintendo Switch. It is stunning. I heard on GOG it does not have multiplayer. Ouch. Because that's a big winner here, is to be able to, admittedly, games like this, these kind of beat 'em up classics, them having online multiplayer is giving many of these games a new lease on life. Because myself, growing up, unless it was like the Ninja Turtle games for NES or Super Nintendo, you basically had to go to the arcade. And of course you wouldn't be able to do that now, but you had to go to the arcade. And there were times I remember growing up where I would pay for some fucking stranger. I'd pay for him to play the arcade game just so I could actually get further in Ninja Turtles, right? In the beat 'em up for Ninja Turtles, or for Knights of the Round, which is probably my favorite along with AVP, Aliens versus Predator. Or yeah, I'd be playing Aliens versus Predator in the arcade, and I'd pay for some idiot to play with me just so that I had a better chance. And basically just so the aliens had some other target to go after besides myself, so that I could see the fucking end of the game. Right. And it can be difficult, to find people to play beat 'em up games with you. And so having the online multiplayer component, this is one of the, usually I don't like online multiplayer, but this is one of the cases where, okay, this is great because now we have people who can help us get through these fucking games. You know what I mean? And so with Streets of Rage 4, to have that, I think that's kind of important. Also understand the main campaign, single player campaign, I think probably would top out at like 4 or 5 hours, depending upon how good you are at it. And if you're really good, you probably get through it in a couple. There's a lot of cool stuff that they've added into it. There's a ton of unlockable characters. There are retro levels that you can get secret access to and everything at certain levels in the game, which adds a lot of replayability. This is a stunning game. This is a perfect game in every metric. The music is perfect. I'm not going to talk about that right now. I'm going to save that. The music is perfect, though, which is what Streets of Rage 2 particularly was so well known for, was the soundtrack is considered one of the greatest soundtracks, not just gaming soundtracks, one of the greatest soundtracks of all time. This is there. The music is there, delivering on the action, no problem. The characters, the buttons are fairly basic, even though they've added in some nice touches where you have a separate button to pick up items now, right? To like pick up the knife or a pipe or whatever, the turkey, to up your health. That works really well. There's so much here that the couple buttons that they added in do it just right, to where they don't make the game too complex and anybody can basically pick it up. But then if you really want to get nitty gritty with it, you can really strategize with the extra buttons. But the button mashing works great, exactly as it should. It's depending upon what level of difficulty you choose with, this can be a really, really punishing game. But the hand-drawn artwork of the game is stunning to look at. And it is a type of game art, game graphic design that is going to make this game go for the ages. It's just going to last because that's always going to look in style. That's always going to look good, right? There's no argument of 2D versus 3D graphics or polygons or anything like that. This is just always going to be a gorgeous game. It's another thing that adds to its perfection. I mean, if I were to rank it, out of 10, it's going to get an easy 10 out of 10. Everything just fits, and the little bit of storyline that's there, it's enough to keep you going. But, you're just having a great time going through the streets, doing your business. And the unique movesets for each character, and it's really nice. I got to give them credit. It's really nice to be able to switch characters between stages, because there's some stages where you really do want a different character. But, Blaze is there and you want to play with her most of the time because, well, you know why if you've played Streets of Rage. But this is a perfect sequel. It brings Streets of Rage back, and it does it in a way that feels absolutely modern, absolutely at home. on a modern console, but it plays, I feel like I just picked up from, I mean, and there was a Streets of Rage 3, not as good as 2, but you get my point. I feel like I just picked up where I left off, and I love that feeling. Okay, where they respect that style of play. And it speaks to a huge point that can be done. You know, you can still make games that are just as addictive and easy to pick up as they were 20 years ago, modernize them just a bit, just enough to where they appeal to the game player perhaps today, or they look good on your screen or whatever. But then you still rock them out like you did back then, and they still feel like a great experience. Now, would I have said that if beat 'em ups were still commonplace made today? Maybe not. Maybe if the market was really flooded with beat 'em ups, it wouldn't have been such a big deal. But I don't know. I think the level of smoothness and perfection and precision of controls that this game delivers, I think it still would have been an absolute standout. I mean, I still love beat 'em ups. My game of the year for 2016 was Double Dragon 4. Easily. I could probably say that Streets of Rage 4 is going to be game of the year for Sovryn Tech when that time comes around. I'm in awe. So pick it up if you haven't. I think it's totally worthwhile on whatever system or whatever platform you go for it. Be warned that on GOG, there's no multiplayer. That might not matter to you. Maybe they're going to re-implement it later, or they're going to implement it later. I don't know. But I am aware that that's not there. And I would argue that in this case, it might be an essential component. If you don't have someone else to play with, you're going to want to find somebody online to, you know, get your unlockables, get through the game, perhaps more. So you can do it single player, but it's not half as fun, and the difficulty might be a little bit above board if if you're just doing it on your own. So just things to consider with it. Anyway, Streets of Rage 4, check it out. I'll be right back with more Sovryn Tech.
The most incredible television event ever as you join the crew of Battlestar Galactica.
Right here, you creepy crawly. I have led the entire human race to ruin.
The last of mankind, fighting for life in a hostile galaxy.
Most of us are dead.
Alone, with only one hope, Battlestar Galactica and her crew.
There is no other destination.
Commander Adama, Captain Apollo, the intrepid Starbuck, and the dazzling Athena, searching for a new and peaceful world.
May as well live for today. We might not have many left. Let the attack begin.
A new age of high adventure, Battlestar Galactica.
Album of the Week.
Time for Album of the Week, and just following up with what we were talking about, yes, the Album of the Week is none other than the soundtrack to Streets of Rage 4. And returning to make music for Streets of Rage 4 is none other than the legend from Streets of Rage 2, that being Motohiro Kawashima, who he doesn't do the entire soundtrack for Streets of Rage 4. There's a lot of people involved with it. But also Yuzo Koshiro is involved, which they were basically the tag team that made that amazing soundtrack for Streets of Rage 2, which is, legendary to this day, especially in the electronic scene. They're here. Olivier Deriviere, I hope maybe I'm pronouncing that name right. Maybe I'm not. Is kind of the main thrust behind this, but there are plenty of others involved in creating it all fits as one sound when you're playing through the game, but it's a very eclectic mix. This soundtrack is amazingly getting released, and I know the classic soundtracks are getting re-released as well, but it's getting released on vinyl of all things as well. But you can get it digitally, and just a brilliant soundtrack. The digital edition I have has 35 tracks, and I mean, it's worth listening to yeah, you could definitely go walking down the street and rock this thing. Great time to be had by all. Again, I mean, there's a little rock in there, little synth, definitely a lot of, your electronic, right? Almost trance music at points. I mean, it's a very mixed bag, but it all comes together perfectly in the game and outside of the game. I think it's worth listening to on its own. So even if you're not somebody that plays video games, I recommend every Streets of Rage soundtrack. They're tremendous. A lot of game soundtracks are fucking brilliant. again, even if you don't play games, I mean, some of the most like more epic stuff that, you know, maybe more instrumental style. Like if you ever listen to the soundtrack for, like Octopath Traveler, stunning, you know, and that's like 4 discs. And, it's amazing. So check it out. The soundtrack for Streets of Rage 4, especially if you're into electronic music, you're definitely going to, and some synthwave and everything, and want something a little more retro, you're really going to get it with this, but great production, great production. So anyway, check it out. Streets of Rage 4, the soundtrack. We'll be right back with more Sovryn Tech.
Hey, baby, I know. You are tired of Gmail. You have had enough. Well, I have a solution for you. What I want you to do is you go to Fastmail, okay? It's fastmail.sovryntech.com. That's the URL you can use. You're going to get a discount with that. You are going to love this. This is email for email's sake. This company does nothing more. Just email, and they do it right. All the latest security technologies. You want to log into your account with your YubiKey? You can do that. Fastmail has your hookup. Very inexpensive plans. I want you to check it out. You go to fastmail.sovryntech.com. That'll get you the hookup, and it's an honor to have them as a part of Sovryn Tech. Woo! Let's get back to the show.
The Golden Stallion doing whatever he wants to do. The Climax.
It is time for the Climax, and we got kind of a shorter one here. And I want to introduce you to something that I am exploring. So as a tech journalist, I find it incumbent of me to, know as much as I can with a lot of these platforms. Now, I mean, if we end up in a world where everybody stopped using Windows and I never have to talk about it again, hey, great. We could talk about Linux all day long. Let's do it. I think we're getting there anyway, but something that I've turned somewhat of a blind eye to over the years is iOS. And there's a story, which I'll actually probably save for the next Sovryn Tech. But 9to5Mac reported on this, that there is, of course, we talked about the efforts that Google and Apple are engaging in for contact tracing. And 9to5Mac reported that on iOS, COVID-19 exposure notifications, as they're calling them, are going to be turned on by default in iOS version 13.5. Now, at first, you'll need a separate app that can actually do anything with those notifications or activate them, but the ability to do so will be on by default. It's not going to be opt-in, it's going to be opt-out. You have to turn that off. Okay, I'll talk about this in an upcoming episode. And so basically, with all of this happening, I want firsthand experience with iOS. And so I ended up getting a used 7th generation, which is the latest one from 2019, iPod Touch. And there's other reasons that I want to mess with this. I want to compare it to Android and everything, and basically, I mean, I know about a lot of the technicals of iOS, but as far as like the actual user experience, it's something I want to understand better. It's something I want to be able to talk to more, since it has gone through such dramatic changes over the years, especially since the last time that I ever really heavily used it. And so getting a latest gen iPod Touch, which is basically an iPhone without the phone, I thought would be a handy thing to have. And I have messed with this device lately. And this will allow me to inform Sovryn Tech users, because I know a lot of you also do use iPhones or iPads or anything along those lines. I'm not going to go so far as to getting an iPad or an iPhone for that matter. And actually, just spending a little bit of time with the iPod Touch has admittedly kind of bolstered my... Let's just say I really don't feel bad not being into iOS over the years, because you get so used to, and again, this is a conversation starter. Eventually, I will do a full review of what it's like using iOS, and it'll be relative to a lot of these concerns around contact tracing and other things as well. But just from a user experience, so let me say this, try and spin this positively, okay? Well, all right, let me start with this. if you 10 years ago when Android, or over 10 years ago, when Android and iOS became the platforms, okay, that people would use on their phone, I think over time, if you've just used Android, or you just started, or you started with iOS and you're still using it, like you're used to what comes with it, right? And you get used to certain ways that you swipe. Again, these are fondle slabs, so touch is such a huge deal. You get set in your ways, basically. Okay. And certainly I want to be sensitive to the fact that I am very set in my ways with Android. I mean, again, you're talking to the guy who literally wrote the book, on Android security. That's me, Brian Sovryn. It's mine. I wrote the book. So obviously I'm knee deep in Android. Okay. So I want to be sensitive to that. And that really, the platform that works best for you is the best platform. That's the ultimate answer when it comes to this sort of thing, right? We can come up with more objective metrics, perhaps, of what makes something better. But ultimately, what works best for you is what works best for you. And so that makes it the best operating system. The experience of setting up an iOS device, I'll just start by saying this was an absolute pain in the ass. Absolute pain in the ass. I mean, in comparison to what it's like to set up, an Android device. Now, granted, with an Android device, most people already have a Google account, so that makes things a lot easier. And things being a pain in the ass usually means, or can often mean, that it's either one or two things. They're just not intuitive, or they're secure, right? Being a pain in the ass, right? There's always the 10th law of thermodynamics, right? There's a trade-off between security and convenience. And I can recognize where a lot of what Apple has done on iOS is a matter of security. And I can appreciate that. Okay. I really can. But there are so many just UI things that have nothing to do with security some have to do with security, that this has been a genuine pain. Like, do you know how difficult it is just to have, locally stored music on this device that you put on there yourself? You have to go through iTunes, basically, unless you want to have it in a cloud device, but then none of that's being really locally stored, right? The players for such are terrible. I mean, Apple has put crazy restrictions on how long an app can run in the background. Again, I can get the advantage arguments for a lot of this stuff, but this has been a real pain in the butt. And so this is something that I am going through, and I'm going to do a fuller review on. But I will say this about iOS. If you want to engage with the modern world, okay, as in, you're not the kind who has a large music library. You're not the kind that has like a large library of your own on anything, and you just use streaming services and, I don't know, whatever. You use a lot of, varying apps to do things, that you take notes on, and all of that. iOS is great for engaging the modern world that we live in. Okay. I feel like if you exist outside of that modern world in any appreciable way, if you do anything different than the way Silicon Valley tells you to do things, iOS is not for you. Or at least it might be a pretty phone that has GPS on it and whatever else. But that's my first blush with using iOS. I have had and like the App Store is so not intuitive. It is so not user friendly, unless you're just looking for something to spend a ton of money on IAPs, and in-app purchases on. It sucks. Like, even trying just to get to where you can update apps manually, pain in the ass. Everything really, and that I get where this is where some of that security argument comes in, right? Like your ability to access different folders. I'm glad that it comes with a great stock file manager, but like you can barely access anything within that. Now I understand that that's where security comes in, right? Okay. Like I have to specifically put, with a lot of the apps I was trying to do, the music I would locally install on the device, I had to put them in a specific file for a specific app. It's not like the app could access a shared folder. Now, to some degree, you can do that, but most of them, for it to work the way that they had programmed it to do it, you had to put it in that app's folder. I mean, just stuff that if you're a power user of any kind, you'd never put up with any of this. So it feels very much like a platform. I mean, and look, I know brilliant people who use iOS. I'm not knocking anything I'm not knocking you. I'm just saying it feels like Apple took a lot of measures to try and just lock shit down to keep the dum-dums secure. And I'm not even necessarily saying that that's a bad idea, but then I am just, using this device for a good while. I am not seeing the magic. I am not looking at this. In fact, I go to the App Store, and this was the big thing that I was expecting to experience, is that I'm going to go to the Apple App Store, and there's going to be so many apps there that are just so fucking mind-blowing, that are so, holy shit, how did I ever not have this in my life? And I go there, and I'm like, well, what's the big deal? Wait a minute. Hell, VLC is neutered on this platform compared to Android. It's not good. I don't get what everybody's talking about. I don't understand why the hell. I mean, you know what is great on here? Okay, I'll give credit where it's due. Apple's apps are pretty damn good. And I've never said differently. I've always said that I understand that GarageBand on iPad, or even Pages, they're all of those things that are built into this, those are dynamite and far superior to what Google does or what's available on Android and so on. But that's just Apple's apps. But then most people I talk to aren't really necessarily using Apple's apps. So I'm baffled. Someone has to explain to me what the big deal is here. And you can email me questions@sovereigntech.com, and you can tell me. I'm seriously, I'm not going to make fun of you. I want to know. You tell me, what is the grandeur of using iOS? Because I don't think it's simple. I don't think it's intuitive. I mean, even just doing something as simple as deleting an email from a notification requires, I know what you hit, not manage, you hit view, right? And then you hit delete. And it's just, there's a complete lack of control if you're any kind of power user on here. And tell me if I'm wrong. Maybe I just haven't had enough time with it, and that's why I'm not doing a full review. But my full review is coming. But I will just put this out there. I am really not impressed. That's great that it's so secure, but I'm really not impressed with what I see before me. And I want to be impressed. And I'm putting it out to you, the listeners. Impress me. Explain it to me. I am open to hearing why iOS is just the greatest fucking thing since... Sliced bread isn't great. I don't know why it's the greatest thing since Star Trek. There, how about that? Because that was great back in the day. How about that? Explain it to me. I want to know. I'm trying to find out, and I'm not seeing it. Anyway, that's it for this week's Sovereign Tech. We'll wrap this baby up, and more Sovereign Tech to come, as well as more user podcast, all kinds of fun stuff. I will see all of you on the other side.
Thank you for listening to Sovereign Tech, an OSIRIS-1 production. Now go out there and make some trouble.